Welcome to The Explainer. So picture this. You're getting ready for a massive celebration, maybe a family wedding or a huge cultural festival. You pick out this sharp, elegant, dark outfit, and you're feeling great. But then, almost immediately, someone in your family stops you in your tracks and says, "Whoa, don't wear black during a festival. It's unlucky." It is such a common, everyday superstition, right? We hear it literally all the time, and honestly, most of us just accept it without a second thought. But today, we're going to dig into the fascinating facts behind this belief. Because here's the really surprising part. Black has absolutely not always been considered unlucky. In fact, the meaning of this color changes completely depending on exactly where and when you look.
Okay, let's dive right into this. Is black actually an unlucky color? That's the core question we need to ask ourselves today. But when we try to trace the historical origins of this widespread belief, we actually hit a pretty massive roadblock. You see, there is absolutely no single person, no specific religion, and no one historical event that you can point to and say, that right there is the exact moment black became the color of bad luck. It just didn't happen like that. There was no overnight decree by some ancient king that suddenly made black the enemy.
Instead, the truth is way richer than that. The symbolism of the color black developed organically over thousands of years. It evolved. And rather than having just one universal meaning that everyone across the globe agreed on, its meaning morphed and shifted dramatically across different cultures over millennia. Think of it like a giant cultural fingerprint. It actually tells us way more about the human beings who lived in those specific times than it tells us about the color itself. To really wrap our heads around this, we need to take a quick global tour to see how radically different traditions interpreted the exact same color.
Section 1. India's fascinating contradiction. Indian traditions present this incredibly deep, paradoxical duality when it comes to the color black. You literally have two completely different interpretations living right alongside each other. And this brilliantly illustrates that exact contradiction. On one hand, sure, we see the associations most people think of when they call black unlucky. In lots of Indian traditions, black became heavily tied to the concept of darkness, to the astrological influence of Saturn, also known as Shani, and just generally to inauspicious occasions. It represents the heavy, the dark, the things you definitely want to avoid during a joyous festival. But then, on the flip side, within that very same culture, black carries a fiercely protective meaning. In so many communities, black threads or specific black objects are traditionally used to protect loved ones, especially kids, against the evil eye or negative energy. So, you see, it's not just bad. It's actually a literal shield against the bad.
And to deepen this contradiction even further, Hinduism gives us the goddess Kali. Her very name literally translates to black or darkness. But take a look at what she actually represents: time, epic transformation, and the destruction of evil. Because she perfectly embodies the destruction of the very things that harm us, the color black associated with her simply cannot be written off as bad in Hindu thought. It's powerful, it's transformative, it is a force that actively removes evil rather than causing it. All right, now we're going to pivot sharply. We're leaving India entirely and traveling way back in time to ancient Egypt.
Section 2. Egypt's Color of Life.
I want you to prepare for a total 180-degree shift here, to a completely overwhelmingly positive perspective. In ancient Egypt, the color black meant fertility. It meant life, regeneration, resurrection. Now, why is that? Well, because the ancient Egyptians didn't look up at the dark night sky when they thought of black, they looked straight down at the ground. They connected the color black directly with the incredibly rich, fertile, dark soil that was left behind every single year by the flooding of the Nile River. Because that life-giving soil produced all their crops and basically fed their entire civilization, black became the ultimate symbol of life and rebirth. Now, what's really interesting about this perspective is how deeply it was baked into their religion. Major gods, like Osiris, the god of the afterlife and resurrection, were frequently depicted in their art with black skin. That was done specifically to tie him to that fertile, life-bringing earth.
Section 3. Traditions of mourning.
So let's ground ourselves back in some concepts that might feel a bit more familiar to Western audiences. We've seen black as a fierce protector and as this beautiful symbol of agricultural life, but let's explore how it actually became the global color of mourning. If we look at Judaism and Christianity, we see a totally different set of associations taking root. In Judaism, black or dark clothing has traditionally been associated with mourning and times of deep affliction in certain contexts. It acts as a visual representation of grief and solemnity. Similarly, over in Christian traditions, black became strongly and almost exclusively tied to mourning, death, sin, and spiritual darkness. It eventually became the standard go-to color for religious clothing signifying solemnity, as well as the absolute standard for funeral rituals. The darkness of the color basically came to represent the absence of light, which symbolically aligned perfectly with the heavy solemnity of death.
Section 4. The true meaning of black. So having taken this rapid-fire tour through India, ancient Egypt, Judaism, and Christianity, we've finally arrived at the climax of our explainer. We are ready to uncover the true meaning of black. And the real truth? It's basically a blank canvas. Let's see how this all builds together into one master summary. When we zoom out and bring all these cultures together, we see the wildly different meanings they assign to the exact same visual input. Think about it. In India, it's protection and the destruction of evil. Over in Egypt, it's fertility and rebirth. In Judaism, it's mourning and affliction. And in Christianity, it's death and sin. Human beings simply gave this color its meanings based purely on their surrounding environments, like that dark Nile soil, or their stories, their religious beliefs, their rituals, and their unique historical experiences. The color itself? It did absolutely nothing. We just projected our own human experiences right onto it.
So the crucial point is this. The color black isn't naturally lucky, and it's not naturally unlucky. It definitely doesn't possess some invisible, magical aura that's going to somehow ruin a festival or bring down bad energy. For one culture, it represented the very end of life. For another, the incredibly fertile beginnings of it. For some, it was a color of deep, profound mourning, and for others, a color of ultimate protection and power. The actual story of black is just so much more fascinating, and honestly, so much more deeply human, than simply writing it off as a bad luck color.
Which brings us to our final takeaway today. I want to leave you with a question. Actually, consider it a tool that you can use in your everyday life. The next time you're getting dressed up for a joyful occasion, and someone taps you on the shoulder and says, "Hey, you can't wear that. Black is unlucky during festivals," I want you to remember this explainer. Just look at them, smile, and ask them a much better question. Unlucky according to which tradition? Because as we've seen today, depending on exactly who you ask and when they lived, that black outfit might just be the luckiest, most life-affirming thing you could possibly put on.